will try to connect, in a way, some different parts in order to highlight a sort of historical continuity and evolution of these specific ideas that are of great interest today in the context of the climate crisis. And the main concept is the synthesis, the combination, in a way, as a new whole of ecology and architecture and planning, in the sense that ecology is not just, in a way, a political movement and an activist movement, but it's also a scientific context within which architecture and planning have the opportunity to reframe themselves and create a new sense of unity. I will try to explain this and give also some important examples from the very recent Greek experience regarding the floodings that we had in the country. So that's just one image of the recent floods. I'm going to explain a bit more about that, but I just wanted to show somehow the disastrous conditions that have been the product of two storms in central Greece, and how this alerted Greek architects, planners, and the administration, because it seems that since now we will be having more and more continuous of unprecedented and continuous phenomena like that of an unprecedented scale, a scale that was never part of any sort of calculations of behalf of infrastructure designers and administration. Here is a map from the European Commission, which demonstrates the vulnerability by flooding of European countries. I tried to kind of focus on the Mediterranean region. One short comment I should make on that is that I find it scientifically also, not just ideologically, very problematic that this map shows only the northern part of the Mediterranean. I think the problem is common and it should be studied as a whole. That's one of my main arguments. So I would expect this map to be updated with all the data concerning the countries of the wider Mediterranean basin. Now, I'll start with the Greek examples that I talked before. I'll talk first about a flood that hasn't taken place yet, which should be, it shouldn't be, a huge flood that could cover huge areas of the metropolitan area of Athens. And just to demonstrate how things have evolved in the past decades, on the right, we have a map which shows the parts of the city that are expected to flood if we have a rainfall, if we have a storm of the size of central Greece in Thessaly. And on the right, we have a 1960s study by Doxiadis Associates, which was making a projection for 2000. And what they were saying was based on their theory of defining zones of planning as the nature areas, cultive areas for agriculture, anthropos areas for human activities, and industry areas. And in this, what we can see by comparing these two images, it's very obvious two things: that the development of the city has been constrained in the plain, which is defined by the mountains which are surrounding, in a way, the metropolitan area of Athens. And Doxiadis at that time had already predicted that it should be important to preserve these natural areas, which and allow the city to evolve, not by covering these empty spaces at that time, but to evolve throughout the Northern National Road and in a way create a sort of linear city which would connect Athens with Evia Island and Thebes, the other historical city, which is something like 100 kilometers away. And the reason for that was that already they sort of knew in a way through their studies that it would be important to allow the development of both these four zones I talked about, because we need nature not just as a pleasure in a way element of our everyday life, but as a kind of natural reserve that can protect our cities and our way of life. And this is something, of course, which has been neglected. The other problem, which is very important, and it is presented here by Professor Bellavillas, is that one of the main reasons why these floods are taking place is the way we have treated the streams and the rivers. And most of them have been covered, or and they are not allowed to have a wider zone, where a buffer zone in a way where the exceeding water in extreme conditions can go. And we see here a map of central Greece, and here you can very obviously understand the kind of vast areas of land of central Greece which have flooded, and some of them have flooded for months actually, or even today, after 2 years afterwards, and they remain flooded. And on the other hand, we have a representation of the flooding caused by Daniel, and there are areas in red and blue which are the urban areas of the city of Volos, which is in a way one of the biggest cities of this region. Now, if we talk about solutions, I think one interesting thing we can point for today's discussion is a methodological issue, which is presented here by the team of Professors Lira, Milopoulos, and Vasiliadis. What they say is that we need to implement an integrated flood protection plan, which includes structural and non-structural measures, community engagement, ongoing monitoring. And this is crucial for reducing flood risks and safeguarding the region's future. By enhancing resilience and adapting to changing conditions, the region of Thessaly can better protect the natural environment and preserve its vital agricultural and economic activities. The essence of this is the method they propose, which is presented here with this diagram, which has to do in a way with circles of assessment, identification, and definition of the problem, collection of data, and testing, discussing, engaging people, and at the same time, in a way, monitoring the continuous evolution of the concept. So what they basically say is that we don't need static models and static sort of perceptions about one-off solutions to this problem, but we need continuous collective effort. Now, the problem with water, of course, doesn't have to do also only with when it rains and when we have too much water pouring from rain. There is a wider phenomenon that's being observed in the last decades, which has to do with the risk of the rise of the sea level. And here we see a map of how UNESCO heritage archaeological sites could be endangered around the Mediterranean by the way the sea level at the Mediterranean basin is rising. Of course, I have to explain that still we're not able, as far as I have studied, we're not able to really define the cause of this phenomenon. But it is one of the main issues, also in the main concerns, and it's not about also only archaeological sites. It's a wider problem because, in a way, around the Mediterranean, I mean, some of the most important cities and human settlements in general are developed in the coastline. So we can understand that this could have huge, permanent, and catastrophic results. Of course, the issue of water is not just about, in a way, the way, you know, our cities and our architecture is resilient, and it will remain for us in the future. It has to do also with social and political concerns. And we have to remember that water is the main route through which we have a huge, in a way, migratory wave, which is moving around the Mediterranean. And I think we need to understand that natural phenomena and the way that they are evolving to the worst, they are pushing also societies and cultures to their limits. And these are created, it is a widespread knowledge in a way that the more we have accentuated problems caused by climate change, the more such phenomena like migration will be triggered. Now, one of the main arguments I will try to stretch is that what we need is in a way a unified way to address these issues. We shouldn't compartmentalize the pieces of knowledge that are related to these issues at hand, and we should try to build a kind of science, in a way, a kind of knowledge that doesn't focus on the specific, but on the study of the interrelations between the different specificities that are defining the problem. And that was a main position by Doxiadis in what he called Ekistics, the science of human settlements, which was an epistemological attempt to create a unified science for the study and design of human settlements. Since we are in Numar, and I'm also representing here the UIA National Human Disasters Work Program, I thought it was necessary to remind us of 10 important points that have been stretched out in the 28th World Conference of the UIA in Copenhagen regarding sustainability. And this led to the definition of a very straightforward manifesto, in a way, as an address to the challenges by climate change. And I think it is important to remind here of two things. The one is that this is not presented just as an environmental problem. It is related directly to social, cultural, and economical concerns. And the second thing to stretch out is that this is presented as an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary concern. So it seems that maybe we already have the solutions if we follow up the manifesto by the UIA. But in a way, there is no room for us to just say, okay, everything has been solved. Okay, we can go on. The widespread evolution of human settlements around the globe, cities of every size, building installations, functional infrastructure as units, as networks. They are not at that time that we are speaking now, they're not yet part of the solution, but mostly they are the main reasons for the problems of climate change. Built space is one of the main consumers of energy and natural resources. And together, and it is also one of the main producers of waste and garbage. The building industry creates around 40% of global CO2 emissions and 35% of waste. So in a way, architecture in general, as a product and as a kind of process, has a very important impact, not just on our environment, but in many other social aspects like public health and human happiness, in a way, and progress. So we have to understand that the problem is very important, and it cannot be cut into pieces. And we have to be together in trying to address this, because it can only be a global concern. So I'm just repeating here the list because I don't want to waste everybody's time with talking too much about the 10 points. You can very easily find them. And in here, we have a list of things that in a way we can now understand that they are very important. But I believe that in reality, we are not necessarily having the kind of architectural consciousness that could allow these 10 priorities or some other ones. I mean, this is an open discussion or still, could be the real priorities that could generate the new methods, the new principles that could guide, design, and evaluate also the work of architects. I think we still need a lot of discussion in order to really try to understand what these principles, which look more like ethical and less architectural, how they can inform design decisions and how they can be a real part of our work. So this was part of, as I explained, the interdisciplinary teams of people, not just architects, biologists, people doing working on farming, food industry, plastics and material science, natural materials for building, prefabricated construction, social and cultural inclusion and defense, and many other representatives in a way of the wider network of our way of life and how cities and architecture are testing grounds for this discussion. So this was actually one main part, as I already said, of the scientific endeavor by Doxiadis in the 60s and the 70s. And this has been globally discussed at that time through a series of publications, both the Journal of Acoustics and the books that came out of the discussions that were triggered by Doxiadis' associates and himself, of course, so throughout the experience of the project. One of the most interesting projects, research projects at that time, was the Ecumenopolis projection, which was how human settlements will evolve as a network, as a relation with cultivation areas and natural areas of our planet towards 2060. More or less, their calculation that human settlements will tend to get unified through the application of contemporary networks has been proved even faster than projected at that time. And the other projection they had for the future was that the importance of networks as something that would define what would happen to human settlements from the 70s until now would be followed by the coming back of nature as the most important parameter in the definition of the other 50 years, let's say. And this, I think, is a common sense today. But when we talk about nature, I think we need to make to state a point that we don't talk about nature in the sense of, I don't know, naturalistic and romantic way of talking about it. It's more about how nature for us is a different model of knowledge in a way, which is governed by this sense of unity of knowledge and can combine in a way all the elements and the subjects that are developing in this world, and they kind of, we have to learn in a way the rules of coexistence. So acoustics, a study of cities and architecture for Doxiadis, was not a taxonomic and descriptive way of knowledge, type of knowledge. It was about understanding the dynamics of change and adjustment to change. So we need to understand nature because we need to understand the ways within which nature is adopting to change and how this change is defined, if there is any rupture point, if there is any bifurcation point, and how we can, in a way, by understanding these natural mechanisms, ecological, in a way, mechanisms, how we can also create our own cities following a similar modeling of evolution. This idea has been primarily developed through an international dialogue, which was developed in the 12 conferences called the Delos conferences, the Holy Island in the Aegean Sea. 10 of them took place in the island of Delos, and I think the other 2 in Athens. And through the participation of important representatives from most of the main sciences of that time, including people like Marshall McLuhan, the media theorist, Arnold Toynbee the historian, Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, important doctors like Alexander Christakis, and architects like Kenzo Tange and Buckminster Fuller. And in this discussion, they got out with this scheme of nature, man, society, networks, and cells as the 5 parameters, the 5 elements governing the evolution of cities. And the other important lesson out of this diagram is that we should not talk about each one of the 5 elements as a unique parameter, but we should talk about the millions of combination of knowledges that we can build when we try to combine all this. And then we should understand that we need a unified way, a holistic way to talk about that. So I'm starting now my closing statements. In a way, then, we can understand that the model presented with these 5 elements is not a linear one, neither a circular one. Theoretically, there was a kind of evolution, like each period of man, in a way, of humans, there has been one of the parameters defined as the most important one in the evolution of cities. And of course, the first one was nature. And theoretically, now we are returning to nature. It's not exactly like that, because we are always returning, but in between, we still bury with ourselves, we carry within us, in our knowledge and in our consciousness, all the experience of the previous ages. So it's a kind of combination of the linear and the circular. And it's not a teleological static model, it's a dynamic one. So, having said all that, our task now is to define the system of life expressed by human settlements so clearly that it can contain every part, aspect, expression of opinion, known or unknown, foreseen or unforeseen. And once defined, our task is then to learn to control the system wisely for the same of mankind. This was the kind of positivism of the 1960s, shared, of course, by Doxiadis. But I think we can at least believe in a way that we can have many prospects if we try to reshape our knowledge about architecture and planning, and more than that, if we need to redesign architecture itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikos.